Elon Musk brings his 5-year-old son to the White House. No one expects what happens next. Not the staff, not the guests, not even the president. Because when the boy says he wants to be president, Donald Trump kneels down and says something no one sees coming. The Roosevelt room was warm with late afternoon light. Thick wooden panels lined the walls, interrupted only by oil portraits, and the slow tick of a brass clock above the fireplace around the long, polished table sat some of the sharpest minds in the country. CEOs, cabinet members, tech, visionaries, and at the head of the table, flanked by his aides, sat Donald J. Trump, president once again. It wasn't a press event. No cameras, no podiums, just a closed-door session on the future of American innovation and leadership, a quiet kind of gathering, the kind where real conversations happen. Elon Musk sat near the end of the table, dressed in his usual dark blazer and open collar. But what drew subtle glances from others in the room wasn't Elon himself. It was the small boy sitting to his right. 5-year-old ex-Elon's son sat upright in his chair, feet swinging just above the floor. His hands rested quietly in his lap. He wore a white shirt, small black sneakers, and an expression far more serious than one would expect for someone his age. He had been still the entire time, watching, listening, not a distraction, just present. Trump had noticed him early on, had glanced twice, actually not out of irritation, but curiosity. There was something in the boy's eyes that reminded him of someone, maybe himself. The meeting moved, as expected. Briefings, opinions, forecasts, talk of AI oversight of Mars. Of the electric grid, it was spirited but measured, no shouting, no grandstanding. When the agenda came to a close, Trump leaned back in his chair and scanned the room. "Anything else?" he asked. "Something worth saying before we wrap this up?" People shifted. A few papers shuffled. Then something surprising happened. A small hand lifted. Trump blinked. Elon turned every head, slowly rotated to the boy at the end of the table. X had raised his hand. Trump smiled faintly. "We've got something?" Elon gave a quiet nod, almost amused. "Go ahead," Trump said, motioning to the boy. He stood slowly. He looked down the length of the room, eyes wide but unshaken. "I want to be president one day." There was a pause, a few soft chuckles from the back one. Executive murmured something like "stardom young," but Trump didn't laugh. He sat forward, rested his elbows on the table, and for a moment it was just the two of them in the room. "You do?" Trump asked. X nodded. "Why?" The boy paused. His voice was quiet but clear. "Because I want to help people who feel like they don't belong." The room fell silent. Even the aides stopped moving. Trump leaned back, exhaled. "That's a good answer," he said finally. X didn't smile. He just waited. Trump looked around the room, then back at the boy. "Come here," he said. Elon looked uncertain, but X walked small steps, careful ones, until he stood beside the president's chair. Trump turned his chair, slightly lowered his voice, but not so low. The room couldn't hear. "You want to be president?" he said. "Let me tell you something about that." He pointed toward the window where the sky was fading orange. "Out there, people think it's about being the biggest, loudest, smartest, strongest." He paused. "But in here," he tapped his chest, "it's about what you carry when no one claps." X's brow furrowed. Trump continued. "When I stood on stages, I could make crowds roar. I could build towers, make deals. But none of that prepared me for walking into a room and seeing someone scared, hurting, and having to decide whether to fix it or to protect myself." He looked at the boy. "Do you know what the hardest part of being president is?" X shook his head. "It's not the enemies, not the cameras. It's the silence, the weight of someone looking at you, needing something, and you not knowing if you're strong enough to give it the room. Remain still." Trump added quieter. "Now people will tell you it's about power, but it's not. It's about responsibility, and when you carry that, it's heavy." X looked down. Trump reached gently and lifted the boy's chin. "But if you remember why you wanted it, if you remember the people who feel like they don't belong, then yes, it can be worth it. The boy blinked slowly. Do you think I could do it? Trump didn't smile. He nodded. Yes, if you stay small in the ways that matter. A whisper passed through the room. Not words, just a feeling of something real. Elon stood now, walked slowly to retrieve his son. Thank you, he said to Trump sincerely. Trump stood too. He looked at X. One last time? You've already got one thing most don't, he said. X tilted his head. A reason? The room emptied slowly after that, but the conversation stayed in the minds of every person who witnessed it because sometimes a little boy raises his hand in a room full of power and reminds them all what power is actually for. By the time the guests had gone and the doors had closed, only 3 remained in the Roosevelt room: Trump, Elon, and the boy who had shifted the air. The 3 of them were quiet at first. Not out of awkwardness, but out of respect for what had just passed between them, like waking from a moment that shouldn't be disturbed. X stood beside a chair, small hands folded in front of him. He didn't fidget. He didn't ask what came next. He just looked between the 2 men waiting. Trump took a slow breath, then walked back to the long table, sat down, and gestured for X to take the seat next to him. Elon stayed standing just a few feet behind his son. You meant what you said? Trump asked. The boy nodded. Why? X looked up at him. Because it matters. Trump leaned back slightly. Most grown men couldn't tell me what that word means. Matters. You're sure? The boy tilted his head. I think it means when you make something better and don't leave it broken. Trump blinked. Elon's expression barely shifted, but something behind his eyes moved. Trump reached for the glass of water in front of him and took a sip. That's a good definition. He said. They sat in silence again, the kind that doesn't need filling. Then Trump glanced toward Elon. You ever wonder what kind of world he's going to inherit all the time? Elon said quietly. Trump nodded. I used to think we had to change the world by force, win, beat control. He looked back at the boy. But sometimes the world doesn't need conquering. It just needs remembering. X looked confused, remembering what. Trump tapped the table gently. Who's not in the room? The boy thought about that, then said something soft, so soft it almost got lost. My mom says it's important to notice who isn't being noticed. Trump smiled faintly. She sounds like someone worth listening to. Elon blinked slowly. She is, he said. They talked like that for nearly half an hour. No policy, no politics, just reflections. Quiet thoughts that somehow didn't feel small at one point. Trump asked X what he liked most about people. X thought hard when they do things that aren't for them. Trump nodded slowly. That's rare. The boy shrugged, but it shouldn't be. Elon had taken a seat by then. Still silent, he watched the 2 of them talk like no one was famous. Like the room didn't carry the weight of decades of noise. He'd never seen Trump like this, not when cameras were around. Not even in private meetings. Something about the boy, his small illness, his seriousness, had disarmed the former president, and in return, Trump had dropped the usual armor. Do you know what I thought being president meant when I was your age? Trump asked. X shook his head. Big desk, big plane, big words. That's what I thought it was, and I got all of that, but none of it helped me sleep. X's eyes widened. You couldn't sleep most nights. Know why? Trump looked away for a moment, then back at him. Because I was afraid I'd forget someone. X furrowed his brow. Someone small, someone who couldn't afford to wait, someone who didn't get their letter read or their call returned. I'd lie in bed and think, what if I missed the person who needed me most? The boy was quiet for a while, then he said, that's why I want to do it. Trump blinked. What if I was president? I'd just sit somewhere every day and talk to one person no one else wanted to talk to. He looked up at his father, then back at Trump. Is that dumb? Trump didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He nodded. That's smarter than what I did. By the time the Conversation wound down. The room had darkened slightly. The chandelier overhead cast a dimmer, warmer glow. The building, though full of power, had fallen into its late evening hush. Trump stood up, stretched his back slightly, then looked at the boy one more time. "You've already got one thing most people don't." X tilted his head. "A reason," Trump said. Then he reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a folded note card. Blank on one side, scribbled on the other. He handed it to the boy. "What's this?" X asked. Trump winked. "It's what I wrote to myself the night before I won." Elon leaned in. X read it aloud softly. "Don't mistake applause for trust. Don't mistake fear for respect. And don't forget the people who looked you in the eye when you were still just a man." The room was silent. X folded the card slowly, like it was made of something delicate. Trump placed a hand on his shoulder. Brief but firm. And then he left no handshake, no signature send-off, just footsteps down a long hall, and a door clicking shut behind him. Elon and X walked back to the residence in silence when they reached the hallway near their guest suite. X tugged lightly at his father's sleeve. "Do you think he meant it?" he asked. Elon crouched to meet his son's eyes. "Yes," he said. "I think he meant it more than anyone else has in a long time." X looked down at the card again, then said almost to himself, "I'm going to remember that part about trust." Elon hugged him harder than usual, not because of the card, but because of what it had just placed in his son's chest. A weight he now carried willingly in the stillness of the White House that night. Two things remained one. An old man's words. To a boy who believed them the next morning in the White House residence began quietly, not with alarms or orders, not with press calls or corridor echoes, but with a boy sitting at the edge of a windowsill, watching the Washington sky lighten from gray to gold. X had been up since before the sun, but not from a bad dream. Something else had pulled him from sleep, a kind of buzzing, not in his ears but in his chest. He didn't understand all of what Mr. Trump had said the night before, but he understood the look in his eyes. That part had said everything. There was something lonely in him, strong but alone. And even though X didn't have the right words for it, he'd recognized it because sometimes he felt that too, even in rooms filled with people, even when his dad was near, especially then in the hallway. Elon paced quietly, sipping from a porcelain mug. He had meetings in a few hours, but something about this morning made everything else feel small. He paused at his son's door, then knocked softly. "You awake?" X's voice came back. "Yes." Elon opened the door. The boy was sitting cross-legged on the window bench, chin resting on one hand. "Did you sleep at all?" X shrugged. "A little, but my head kept thinking." Elon smiled faintly and stepped inside. "You want to tell me what about X?" Didn't turn right away about why I asked what I asked. Elon waited. X continued. "I didn't plan to say it. It just felt like I had to. And what made you ask him?" "He felt big." The boy said simply, like, "People look at him a lot. But I wondered if anyone ever asked him how he got that big, or if it made him lonely." Elon sat beside him, placing the mug gently on the windowsill. The steam curled upward between them. "I think he probably gets asked a lot of things," Elon said, "but maybe not that." They sat for a while, watching the sky change. Then X said something that caught Elon off guard. "Daddy, I think I meant it." "Meant what?" "What I said about being president." Elon looked at him quietly. "That's a big thing to mean," I know, X replied. "But last night didn't make me scared of it. It made me want to grow into it." Elon nodded slowly. "And what do you think you'd do first?" X hesitated, then said, "I'd listen to people who aren't usually invited." Elon's throat tightened just slightly. Like who? X's voice lowered. Like kids who live in cars, or people who clean the buildings but don't get to sit inside them. Elon took a deep breath. "You're thinking about the woman by the train station, aren't you?" X nodded. "She asked for water and no one stopped." But she looked like someone's mom. She probably is, Elon said softly. I think she deserves a seat. Elon put an arm around him, not as a gesture, but as a grounding away to keep himself from floating too far on the emotion rising in his chest. His son wasn't making a statement. He was forming a calling, and that scared him, and it moved him all at once. Later that morning, a handwritten envelope was slipped beneath their door. No stamp, just a White House seal, and in slanted penmanship to X from DTX. Opened it slowly. Inside was a single note card. It read, "You asked the right question, you made the room stop, that's leadership. Keep your reason, never trade it for applause." There was no signature, only a small sketch at the bottom, a crude drawing of a hand holding a candle that afternoon as the sun stretched long shadows across the south lawn. Trump invited Elon for a brief walk, just the two of them. Secret Service hung back as they strolled the manicured path. He's not normal, that boy. Trump said finally, I know I don't mean in a bad way. I mean he's not distracted. Elon smiled faintly. No, he's not. Trump looked straight ahead. When I was his age, I just wanted to build the tallest block tower, make the other kids jealous, be the one people looked at. Elon glanced sideways and now Trump slowed. Now I wish I'd ask more questions like he did. There was a pause, then he added, I think people look at him because he doesn't need them to. Elon nodded. He looks for something else. Trump stopped walking. You're going to have to protect that, I know. From cameras, from voices, from ambition. I know, Elon said again, quieter this time, because that's the kind of boy, Trump added, who becomes something we've forgotten we can be. That evening X wrote something down for the first time. It wasn't long, just a sentence. He slipped it under his pillow before bed like a secret only morning was allowed to read. If I ever forget who I said I wanted to help, then I shouldn't do it. And in that moment, beneath the roof of the world's most powerful building, a boy began to carry something stronger than fire. He carried conviction, and it glowed. The next morning, the headlines came. It started with a single photo, grainy, taken from outside the Roosevelt Room, just a faint blur of Donald Trump kneeling beside a small boy, their heads nearly touching. No microphone, no podium, just two figures, one weathered by time, the other barely started. Within hours, the internet was buzzing. Who is the boy who made Donald Trump listen inside the White House? Moment that silenced the room. Elon Musk's son, and the question that changed everything. The press didn't have the whole story, but that had never stopped them before. By mid-afternoon, reporters were shouting questions at the gates. Mr. Musk, did your son declare a presidential run? Is this a campaign stunt? President Trump, will you endorse him in 2048? Trump didn't answer. Elon didn't either. But X noticed that evening after they returned to Elon's private residence, the boy sat on the floor, legs crossed. Head bowed. The card Trump had given him was in his hands. Elon watched from the doorway for a moment, then stepped inside. They're saying things, Hex said. I know they're making jokes. I know I didn't say it to be famous. I know that too. Elon said. X looked up. Then why do they want to turn it into something else? Elon sat down beside him because they're not used to small things changing big rooms. So they make it louder, messier, easier to understand. X was quiet. But Elon added, What you said, it wasn't small, not really. The boy stared at the card again. Is it bad that I still want it? Elon looked him in the eye. No, it's good. That's how you know it's real. Meanwhile, across town, Trump was doing something he rarely did. He sat alone. No staff, no notes, no advisors. Just him and a single notebook. Blank leather bound with the initials D.J.T. Etched into the corner. He opened it. He flipped past pages filled with campaign ideas, speeches, and scattered quotes. Then on a fresh page he wrote one line. The room went quiet, not because he was powerful, but because he wasn't trying to be. He closed the notebook, and for the first time in years, he felt something strange. He didn't want to be quoted, he just wanted to be understood. The next day, Trump sent one message, not to the press, not to Congress, not even to his inner circle. It was a handwritten note. Sealed with a presidential stamp delivered to Elon by hand. Inside it read, "Don't let them make it about noise." The boy asked something holy, and I answered, "That's all. This was no signature." Just the same small sketch of a hand holding a candle. Elon tucked the note in his pocket and said nothing. That evening, after the noise had swelled and burned itself out, X came to Elon with an idea. "I want to do something," he said. Elon looked up from his reading. "What kind of something?" "I want to write a letter to other kids." Elon set the book down. What would it say? X thought hard, then answered that you don't have to wait until you're big to care about big things the next morning. That letter, scrolled in careful, clumsy handwriting, was taped quietly to the door of X's bedroom. Not for the world, not for reporters, just for the people in the house. It read, "If you're small and you feel big things, that means you're not broken. It means you're paying attention. Keep going." And underneath, in parenthesis, "I still want to be president, but now I know why." And in the quiet that followed the storm, something beautiful remained. Not a campaign, not a headline, but a whisper that refused to be drowned. The world moved on quickly, as it always did. The press eventually turned its attention to other scandals, other statements, other storms. The headlines shifted, the hashtags faded, but some things don't disappear. With the news cycle, some moments stay. And for those who had been in the Roosevelt room that night, the night a little boy said he wanted to be president, the stillness lingered because it hadn't been about policy or spectacle. It had been about something harder to name, something sacred back in Texas. Weeks later, Elon watched from the porch as X sat with a notebook on his lap, drawing quietly. It was late afternoon, the sky turning the color of soft fire. "Still thinking about it?" Elon asked, stepping down the porch steps with a bottle of water. X didn't look up. "I don't think I stopped." Elon handed him the water and sat beside him in the grass. "Are you thinking about what people said?" X shook his head. "I'm thinking about what I said, if I meant it." Elon waited, and he asked. "I did," the boy whispered. "But I didn't know how big it was until I saw how scared some people were. Scared they laughed or made it a joke, because when something little feels that real, it makes grown-ups nervous." Elon let out a breath. The boy was right. He looked at the notebook. "Can I see what you're drawing?" X turned it gently so Elon could see it wasn't a building or a rocket or even the White House. It was a group of kids all sitting in a circle. One was raising their hand, the others were listening. In the middle of the drawing was something simple, a small torch balanced between them. The flame was small but steady. "They're all presidents," X said. "Not the kind with suits, the kind that know when to stop talking." In Washington, Trump had kept the boy's letter. He didn't put it in a frame. He didn't post it on Truth Social. He kept it in his breast pocket, folded tight. Most people thought it was a note card or schedule. They had no idea what it was, but sometimes when he was walking alone or waiting in a holding room before an appearance, he'd take it out and read the last line. "I still want to be president, but now I know why." And each time something inside him softened. Because for all the people who ever shouted his name or waved his signs, only one person had ever made him feel accountable, not to a vote, but to his own soul. A month later, an envelope arrived at Elon's home. It had no return address. Inside was a photograph, a black and white still of the Roosevelt room from that night in it. Trump knelt at eye. Level X stood before him, hands behind his back. Listening on the back of the photo was one